4. A note left by his mother folded neatly in the drawer. "Ryan, please come to dinner tomorrow. We need to talk." Judy's eyes lingered on that line. Then she looked up. "We always think we have tomorrow," she whispered. "Until someone decides we don't." The clock on the wall ticked once. The cameras rolled, and the story slipped further into the darkness that came before justice. The night before the murders had begun like 100 others. Quiet, ordinary, deceptively calm. The Keller family's dinner table was small, the kind built for closeness, not distance. But that night, closeness was impossible. Ryan's mother, Elaine Keller, had cooked his favorite meal, macaroni baked with cheddar crust, the kind she made when she wanted to start over after a fight. His younger sister, Lily, 12 years old, sat beside her clutching a drawing pad. It showed a stick-figure family, 3 people under a yellow sun. The sun had a smile. Ryan barely looked at it. "You didn't have to make this," he muttered, pushing his food aside. "I wanted to," his mother replied. "We used to talk at this table, but that's what the house had forgotten how to do, talk." The silence stretched until it wasn't silence anymore. It was distance in disguise. Elaine tried again, her voice trembling at the edges. "Your teachers called. They said you've stopped showing up. Ryan, I just need to know you're okay." He stared past her. "You're not listening." "Then help me understand." He looked down at the table, his hands tightening. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. Lily's pencil stopped moving. She watched her brother, sensing something she couldn't name. "You're both the problem," Ryan said suddenly. "You talk like you know what I need." "You don't." Elaine's face didn't harden, it broke in quiet pieces. "I know you're angry," she said softly. "But anger isn't who you are." He laughed once, hollow. "You don't know who I am." In court, Judy read this exchange aloud from the detective's report. Her tone was neutral, but her eyes were not. They carried weight, like a judge and a mother at once. The gallery sat frozen. The transcript read like a storm that had whispered before it struck. "The argument lasted 12 minutes, Judy said, scanning the lines. "No shouting, no threats. Just resignation. That's what makes it terrifying." She looked at Ryan. "You had every chance to leave that table." He didn't answer. He hadn't answered anything all morning. The defense attorney stood. "Your Honor, we're not disputing the tragedy. We're asking the court to consider diminished capacity." He was 17, his brain wasn't finished. Judy didn't blink, his choices were. The sentence landed heavy. The courtroom drew a collective breath that no one wanted to release. The prosecutor rose next. Calm, deliberate. This wasn't a moment of rage. It was a moment of control. He stepped closer to the display screen. Photos appeared. Text messages, timestamps, the knife receipt. Each one like a nail in a coffin he'd built for himself. He didn't lose control, Your Honor. He rehearsed it. Judy leaned back, expression unreadable. The clock ticked louder. The boy's composure didn't break, but his silence had a sound of its own. Behind the glass wall, a producer whispered, "She's letting the silence speak for her." When Judy finally spoke, her voice was low, like someone cutting through fog. "The night before this happened, your mother asked you to come home for dinner." A pause. "She didn't invite a murderer. She invited her son." The audience didn't move. The red light on camera 2 glowed steady. Judy closed the transcript, her fingers pressing the page flat, as though she could smooth out time itself. "Tomorrow," she said, almost to herself, "is the most dangerous word in a broken home. Everyone thinks it's guaranteed." The words weren't for the cameras. They were for the echo that would live long after. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly in the studio's audio feed, a storm forming where memory had already fallen. By the 4th hour of testimony, even the lights above the bench seemed to dim beneath the weight of what was being said. The courtroom wasn't just quiet anymore, it was reverent, like a church where the sermon had turned into confession. Judge Judy sat perfectly still, her reading glasses halfway down her nose, a pen tapping in rhythm with the clock. Ryan Keller's defense attorney, a young man in an immaculate navy suit, stood in the center of the room. His voice trembled, not from fear but from strategy. "Your Honor," he began, "the court has seen the evidence, but what it hasn't seen is the home this boy came from." He turned toward the cameras, hands opening as if to offer an explanation to America itself. Ryan's mother was controlling, demanding. His sister idolized her. The pressure— Judy raised a finger slightly. "Counselor." Her tone wasn't loud, but it stopped him mid-sentence. "You're close to crossing a line," she warned. He hesitated, then pressed on anyway, the kind of mistake ambition makes when it forgets about decency. "Sometimes, Your Honor, love can suffocate." His mother pushed him past breaking point. The gallery gasped softly. The prosecutor's pen froze mid-note. Judy leaned forward, her eyes sharp and cold. "You're suggesting she caused her own murder?" The attorney's throat tightened. "I'm suggesting she created the environment—" "Stop!" Her pen dropped onto the file with a sound that sliced through the silence. The cameras caught her expression, a blend of disbelief and disappointment. "Counselor, the dead don't get cross-examined in my courtroom." The room went still. Even Ryan lifted his head slightly, as though realizing the air had changed. Judy's voice softened, which somehow made it sharper. "You're not defending a child. You're defending a choice." And that choice began when he silenced the only people who loved him. Behind the glass, the control room murmured, "She's not judging, she's dismantling." The defense attorney lowered his gaze. His argument had collapsed under its own cruelty. Ryan sat motionless, but the corner of his jaw twitched, a sign that the armor was cracking, even if just for a moment. His eyes glistened, not with tears, but with the discomfort of being seen. Judy didn't look away. "You can't make a villain out of the people you buried," she said quietly. "That's not a defense. That's denial." She turned back to her papers, but the room stayed frozen. Even the audience in the back rows had forgotten to breathe. The prosecutor cleared his throat gently. "Your Honor, the state rests." Those words, simple as they were, landed like the closing of a vault. Judy folded her hands again. "The defense may proceed with sentencing remarks tomorrow morning," she said, though everyone knew there was nothing left to say. Ryan stared down at the table. His reflection in the polished wood looked older than 17, like someone already buried under the weight of his own name. As the bailiff announced recess, the audience rose quietly. No chatter, no movement beyond the shuffle of restrained awe. Behind the bench, Judy removed her glasses and whispered to herself, "You can't reason with absence." The cameras cut. The red lights dimmed. But the sentence everyone had come for, the one that would end the story, was still waiting on the other side of dawn. The next morning, the courtroom didn't feel like the same place. The air was colder. The seats seemed smaller. Even the light through the tall windows looked pale, as if reluctant to touch what was about to happen. Ryan Keller was brought in early, escorted by 2 deputies. His wrists were cuffed in front, his orange jumpsuit pressed as though someone in holding still believed in appearances. He sat down without looking at anyone. Not the cameras, not his lawyer, not the rows of strangers waiting to watch justice arrive. Judge Judy entered a few minutes later. No band, no gavel flourish, just the steady sound of heels on tile. The room rose automatically like muscle memory. She took her seat, adjusted her robe, and looked straight ahead. For a moment, no one spoke. It was the kind of silence that doesn't ask for respect. It demands it. "We are here to conclude the case of the state versus Ryan Keller," she began. "You've heard every fact. You've had every chance. And this court has nothing left to uncover, only to decide." Her tone wasn't harsh. It was calm, the kind of calm that feels heavier than rage. The defense attorney stood first. His voice was quieter now, humbled by yesterday's warning. "Your Honor," he said, "my client accepts responsibility. He understands the gravity of what he's done. We only ask that the court consider his youth, his ability to change." Judy tilted her head slightly. "Youth explains mistakes, Counselor. Not murders." The attorney's words faltered, his notes trembling in his hands. "He's expressed remorse privately." "Remorse is private because it's safe there," Judy interrupted. "Accountability isn't," the audience murmured softly. The court reporter's fingers paused for half a second before continuing their rhythm. Ryan stared straight ahead, still silent. But this time, there was something different in his posture, a slouch that wasn't arrogance. It was resignation. The prosecutor rose. "Your Honor, this was not a crime of passion. It was a decision of procedure. The evidence shows calculation, not confusion. And while the law allows us to weigh mercy, it does not require us to mistake it for justice." Judy nodded once. Agreed. The prosecutor sat. The gallery waited. The cameras zoomed closer to Judy's face. The calm before consequence, then For the first time, Judy addressed the boy directly. "Ryan Keller," she said, her voice low but clear, "when you took their lives, you took the version of yourself that could have become something better. You didn't destroy 2 people. You destroyed 3. He blinked slowly. The weight of her words seemed to settle where even guilt hadn't reached. "Your mother tried to save you until her last breath," Judy continued. "Your sister believed you were a hero. The question I have is, what do you believe now?" Ryan's lips parted, but no sound came. "That's what I thought," she said softly. A reporter in the front row lowered her pen. There was nothing left to write. The clock on the wall read 10:17 a.m. The sentencing would come next. Outside the courthouse, the rain had stopped. The street was empty, waiting, like the country watching through a lens, about to hear the 3 words that would end a life and define a legacy. Judy closed the case file, folded her hands and whispered to the clerk, "Bring me the sentencing sheet." Her eyes never left the defendant, the boy who had ended. 2 lives was about to be measured against them. Bailiff's voice broke the hush. "All rise," the words echoed, off the paneled walls like ritual. Everyone stood. Cameras adjusted focus. The red recording light glowed steady. The sentencing had begun. Judge Judy didn't look at her notes. She didn't need to. She'd already memorized every word, every contradiction, every sigh that had slipped through the trial. Her expression was unreadable, a balance of grief and law. Ryan Keller stood at the defense table, wrists chained, eyes fixed somewhere just above her bench, as if trying to stare through her instead of at her. His lawyer hovered at his side, pale and wordless. Judy drew a slow breath. The court has reviewed every motion, every plea, and every excuse. A pause. There are moments when justice feels heavier than it should. This is one of them. The gallery didn't move. The floor creaked beneath the weight of the moment. She looked straight at Ryan. "You took from this world 2 people who would have forgiven you. Your mother, who believed no darkness could reach her son. Your sister, who thought monsters only lived in stories. You proved them both wrong." The boy's shoulders stiffened, but his eyes stayed blank. "You have said nothing since this trial began," Judy continued, "and silence can mean 2 things, reflection or defiance. I've been in this room long enough to know which one this is." Her tone sharpened. "You planned, you prepared, you finished, and you sat there afterward, not calling for help but waiting for dawn. That isn't panic. That's patience." The audience gasped softly. The words struck like a hammer hidden inside a whisper. Behind the glass wall, a producer whispered, "Hold this shot." "This is the moment." Judy leaned forward, voice lower now, almost intimate. "You are 17 years old. The law calls that a minor. But morality has no age limit. What you did is eternal." She folded her hands together. "Therefore, the court sentences you as follows." The courtroom seemed to shrink. The silence so tight it hummed. For the murder of Elaine Keller, life in prison. For the murder of Lily Keller, life in prison. For the desecration of what remains of innocence, life in prison. 3 sentences, 3 lives for 2 lost. The words didn't rise. They fell slowly, deliberately, like stones into a deep well. Reporters scribbled furiously, the scratch of their pens the only sound left. Ryan blinked. Not a tear, not a plea, just a slow, hollow blink. The kind that means a door has closed behind you forever. Judy's next words came softer. "You will serve these consecutively. You will grow old knowing that the rest of the world did not stop moving because of you." A beat passed. "The case of the state versus Ryan Keller is hereby concluded." Her gavel came down once. Clean. Final, the gallery erupted. Not in applause, not in shock, but in breath. The kind you forget you were holding. A woman in the back row wept quietly into her sleeve. The bailiff approached Ryan, guiding him gently but firmly toward the exit. The boy turned once, not toward Judy, but toward the empty space where his mother might have been. For the first time, his expression cracked. It wasn't regret. It was realization. The understanding that justice isn't a sentence you hear once. It's a silence that follows you forever. Judy set down her pen, exhaled softly, and whispered to herself, "There's no victory in this. Only order." The cameras lingered a few seconds longer, capturing her expression, not of triumph, but of fatigue. The kind that belongs to someone who's seen too much truth to ever look away again. When the cameras finally cut, the silence didn't. It lingered like smoke. The crowd began to move, but no one spoke above a whisper. The courtroom that had just witnessed judgment now felt like a church emptied after confession, hollow, sacred, and heavy. Judge Judy stayed seated for a long moment after the bailiff announced adjournment. The papers before her were no longer a case file, they were a eulogy. The boy's footsteps, the clink of the chains, the creak of the door. All of it stayed with her even after the sound faded. She removed her glasses, rubbed the bridge of her nose, and let the room exhale without her. When she finally rose, she didn't head straight to chambers. She stood for a moment, eyes on the empty defense table. 3 lives, she whispered, and none of them free. The clerk pretended not to hear. The cameras were off, but Judy's words were for herself. She'd always believed in the law's balance, but every now and then balance felt too cold. Outside, the courthouse steps had turned into a storm of microphones and flashes. Reporters shouted questions at anyone wearing a badge. Headlines were already forming. Judge Judy delivers triple life sentence. America divided over teen killer verdict. But the people who mattered most, the neighbors, the teachers, the families, weren't shouting. They just stood in the drizzle, faces pale, hands folded. One of Lily's classmates held a small sign in shaky marker, "Justice for Elaine and Lily." A news anchor's voice carried over the noise. Some call it harsh. Others call it the only way. In the producer's booth of the studio, where the broadcast had been directed, the staff replayed the final minutes. The camera had caught everything. Judy's delivery, Ryan's stillness, the silence that filled the air after the gavel. "Don't cut the silence," one producer said. "That's the story." And it was, because the verdict wasn't just 3 sentences, it was a moment of reckoning. The kind that doesn't trend but stays. Later that evening, Judge Judy sat alone in her office, the lights dim. The robe hung on the hook beside her desk, like the skin of something she'd outgrown for the night. She looked out the window, rain streaking the glass like fingerprints. On her desk lay the mother's handwritten note that had been entered as evidence. "Ryan, please come to dinner tomorrow. We need to talk." She picked it up, read it once more, then folded it back with care. "Tomorrow," she said quietly, "is a word that never keeps its promise." For a long time, she sat there, the city hum faint beneath her window. The justice system was built to punish wrongs, but no system could fill the silence left behind. When she finally turned off the light, the courtroom below her office stood dark and still. The flag behind the bench hung perfectly still. The chair where Ryan had sat was empty, but his presence lingered, the reminder that justice doesn't erase pain. It only contains it. As she closed the door behind her, the echo of the gavel seemed to follow, a heartbeat made of wood and consequence, and for the first time that night, she allowed herself to whisper what the cameras would never hear. May their names outlive his. Days turned into weeks, but the echo of that verdict didn't fade. Clips of the sentencing spread across social media, not because of outrage, but because of how quiet it was. No yelling, no celebration. Just truth spoken like scripture. Students debated it in classrooms. Parents whispered about it over dinner. Some said the punishment was too severe. Others said it was mercy disguised as consequence. But every person who watched it remembered one thing. The moment Judge Judy said, "You destroyed 3 lives, not 2. That line lived on like a warning carved into stone. In her chambers, Judy